In this video, we're going to talk about how to strategically apply to a job in a recession, and more importantly, in this time where we're dealing with not just a recession but also a pandemic. What do you do? I'm going to share some of my approach, and it's something that you don't have to do this every single time, but it's something I think is worth knowing how to do if you really like a job. I think crossing all these buckets are really good. So let's go through it. So the first thing I recommend doing when you're about to apply to a job, so the best case scenario, let's talk about, this is like the ideal scenario is every single time you submit a resume, you have fully tailored that resume to the job. And what that means is looking for keywords, trying to use their language in the resume. And that means looking at the job description, looking at keywords, looking at specific phrases they're using. And it could be as simple as, they might say, like, we're looking for somebody who's diligent, whereas you might use a different word, like you might use, I'm very hardworking. But by using a word that they are familiar with and comfortable with, these sorts of things are, I think, the ideal. Now, that's really important too. If you are unemployed, I think doing that level of tailoring is helpful, and you may have the time for that if you're unemployed. If you're employed, I think that can be really daunting, spending hours and hours and hours customizing. It might take you like an hour or two just to customize a resume. That's a lot of time, especially if you're submitting even just 5 resumes. We're looking at 10 hours there, right? And that's a lot to ask for somebody who's currently employed. So here's what I recommend doing to help with that is, and so again, if you're looking at just, so let's talk about just tailoring in general. If you're employed, or if you are looking to kind of streamline it a little bit to take some of that work off your plate with every single resume. What I recommend doing is trying to identify buckets of job categories that you're applying to. So for example, let's say that you are dead set on one type of job. Let's say that you are an economist, you have a PhD in economics, you have been kind of training your whole life to do this. You want to do economics, you want to be in an economics role, and the specific role that you're looking for is an economist. That's going to make it easier for tailoring a resume, but it's also, it's going to hurt you on the flexibility side, especially if that role is in high demand for job seekers, but not for employers. And so if there's a lot of job seekers who are looking for that, you're in a lot of trouble. But let's say in that situation you have one category. Let's say, however, let's say you have another person that is willing to apply to maybe 3 or 4 different types of jobs. So let's say that they are a marketing ops is what they want to do. They want to be a marketing ops coordinator is what they're currently doing. Let's say that they're willing to do marketing ops coordination, which would be one category. Let's say they're also interested in doing social media management. They have some experience in that, job category 2. Let's say that they're also they're really good at copy editing, and they're willing to actually do like a full copy editing job for a marketing department. So those are 3 different categories of jobs, right? The marketing operations coordinator, the social media manager, and the copywriting, copy editing job. What you can do here is create a tailored resume for each of these 3 categories, and then start with that when you apply to jobs. You might find that it seems good enough as is because you've customized it for the category, or you might find that you want to do additional customization, right? You might have a role that focuses on a little bit more of one particular area. Like you might find if you're doing let's say you're doing the social media management job, you might find that they really, really care about Twitter. And you're like, well, okay, maybe I need to highlight Twitter more so than I've done in my resume currently. But by starting with a tailored resume for the bucket, you're doing some of that work up front, so you're not having to maybe repeat that work, and you'll still have at least a somewhat tailored resume. The second thing I recommend doing, but again, that's kind of if you are maybe short on time, or if you're currently employed. If you're unemployed, I think doing a lot more customization, even though it takes time, I think you can potentially get a lot of value out of it. After you apply to a job, you might be tempted to just kind of let it sit. Like, I applied, I got the thank you, they said they're going to review it, cool. What I recommend doing is then, after you've applied, try to get your resume in the hands of somebody who works at that company. What I do is I reach out to people on LinkedIn. I will message people on LinkedIn. These might be people I have not interacted with before, I have not met before. I will message them on LinkedIn and I will ask, hey, I just applied to this role. I'm wondering if you would pass along my resume to a hiring manager. And this part's, I think, really important from my perspective. I will also say, if you would like to talk on the phone, I'd be happy to do that. It's surprising how people who I don't know will be, at times, very willing. Will be like, hey, I'll pass along your resume. I'll refer you. I had one situation where I did this, and I think I had, the recruiter commented I had like 3 or 4 people who had referred me for a position. And so this is something that I think can be really, I think this is something that can be really helpful, is to have kind of someone who's sort of in your court. It might put you ahead of other candidates, and it might get your resume more notice. So I recommend doing that every single time. If you have, I don't want to say every single time. Don't overwhelm yourself. But I would say that every time that you're really serious about a role, if you really like a role and you want to make sure it happens, I would recommend doing this process of tailoring the resume, either using a bucketed tailored resume or a completely fully tailored resume for the job. And then after you apply, try to network with somebody at the company and ask them to send your resume to the hiring manager or to recruiting or to refer you, and then offer to get on the phone and talk to them. And what that's going to do, especially for a really good LinkedIn profile, what it's going to do is it's going to hopefully give them more confidence. Like, okay, this person's willing to have a phone call with me and talk about their resume. Great, you know. And if you have a really solid LinkedIn profile, they might. I had one person just say, like, I think you have a great LinkedIn profile, and they seem to have a really high confidence in me. This is the approach I recommend. So to summarize again, tailor the resume. You can save time by tailoring in buckets for different job buckets, job categories that you're applying to. After you apply, do an outreach, do some networking every single time if you really care about the job. And yeah. So that's the general approach I recommend. It's something I think can be really helpful. It can also help distinguish you from other folks, and it can help get your resume higher up on the stack of the candidates they're looking at. In other videos, we're going to talk about other strategies and other tips that I recommend, but this one is specifically focusing on the job application process. As always, new videos will be every Wednesday, and we have more to come for this particular playlist, so stay tuned.